you know?
Right.
Oh, I need it. Well, I need it. I need this coffee for what? I need my stacks for what? You know, it's like, what will happen if I don't have it? And sit with that, because it's like your mind has this underlying belief, it's calculated. My needs aren't going to get met. Well, what will happen? That it's afraid will happen. Oh, we're going to feel this. Okay, can I feel that and survive? You know, it's like, well, you're going to be afraid. So I know that when I did, my process years ago, the first time was to do water 1 day a week. And my mind went ballistic with opposition. I'm like, holy crap. It's like there's a fear I'm going to pass out and die while driving a car. You know, it's like because I don't have enough nutrition in my body. You know, I'm going to pass out faint. And I'm like, wow, for skipping a meal. Okay. Uh, and so it was a good thing I had some time before I actually did that day. And I'm like, okay, I planned out the day to like have very little exertion. Don't drive any heavy equipment or airplanes, and and see if I could live. And lo and behold, I lived. And I'm like, well, okay, that story's not true. And then the next week, I'm like, okay, I can handle a little. I was fine. Like, let me handle a little more exertion. And then it's like a little more exertion. So the third and fourth time, I was like, well, it's kind of like living a normal day. And the story was like, yeah, I guess we were wrong about that. But it was a lot of fearful scenarios that went into the journal. But then the experiment, like, what's reality?
I think probably the biggest thing that I get caught up looping in the mind is I go from the discomfort, the feeling of discomfort, and avoiding that feeling of discomfort. And then I get into the narrative of, well, why would I want to make myself feel discomfort, right? Like, why would I, like, going into like, what do I want? Well, my body wants this. So there's a looping scenario there that I was just kind of thinking about. I should
Okay.
do some writing around that, but
Okay. So let's look at it this way. Is your Does your body want that?
well, I
Or
think my
is
mind tells it does.
the mind tells it? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a difference, like you're believing the mind, you want that. And you say, if I don't have that, if I don't follow this cravings, I'm going to feel this emotion. Like, okay, so we're using food to distract us from feeling emotional discomfort.
Yeah.
Very typical emotional eating. So then the justification narrative, what I just heard was, well, I don't want to feel this way. I'll just eat. Like that's a solution. Like the food is the savior. This food is the safety. Okay.
Right.
And so now we've elevated the idea of what food is, believe that. And the narratives, well, I don't want to do that to myself. What is that? Be very specific and work in clarity. I don't want to feel that emotion. Which character says that narrative? Okay. Why would I do that to myself? Why would I put myself to feeling that emotion? Okay. And the assumption there is that this suppressing distraction of emotion is the answer. The truth is the emotion's already there. And the question is, do I want to distract myself and suppress that emotion? Do I want to do those things?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's say it's shame. Very typical way to avoid emotion. Go distract ourselves, overeat. Then we feel heavy in our body. We feel bloated, feel heavy, take a nap. But then there's typical narrative story like overeating. oh, I ate too much, I shouldn't have done that, I did something wrong, I'm bad at we get back to shame.
Yeah.
So very typically, the emotion that we're trying to avoid, our distraction narrative takes us back there anyway. So we haven't actually avoided the emotion. We've just added a layer on top. Now we're ashamed of how much we overate. And this one's very typical for trauma. That's why I know it pretty well. So are you really, so there is a if you ask the question, oh, I don't want to feel that, or why would I want to feel that? The answer is no, I don't want to feel that. Why don't, but it's a question structured in a way of denial,
Right.
as opposed to the question, what am I doing with food? How am I using food in relationship to my emotions? Oh, I'm using food as a distraction, denial of my emotions. So depending on how you structure the question, and so this is why you have to write it out on the page, it's like, what's that question? What's that defense of this habit doing? Which character is using that narrative as a defense of the habit? You know, it's coming up with an answer, but it's the question is a setup for a particular answer to keep the habit in place. If you just answer the question, you've reinforced it. You have to look at the question and say, what is this question? How is it set up to give me a certain answer that reinforces this pattern? So this is where you have to question the questions.
That's tricky. The mind is tricky.
I know.
Darn thing.
I know.
I see that. Yeah, for sure.
Is that clear in how to look at?
Yeah, that is clear. How the setting up of the questions is really valuable. Also, so if it goes back to that, it's covering up an emotion, then would you go into not as well as writing, but maybe like doing some emotional release instead of, yes.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
you do the emotional release, but maybe you also look at, take your time, like what characters are afraid to feel that emotion.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't necessarily jump into that emotion. Go to like, well, let's set ourselves up for success, depending on the size and how big the craving is. Like, oh, that's a big well of shame. Well, how am I managing shame? Am I comfortable feeling shame? Can I do it as an observer? What are these other things that they're busy distracting us with food? They're afraid to feel shame. They're afraid that we'll be overwhelmed. They're afraid of the judgment that will start. It's like maybe there's some other layers that we need to inventory about fear of being judged for being that worthless person that exaggerates it. So maybe there's some other pieces you want to take care of first before you go into that lower, deeper level of emotion.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that you have a stronger, grounded perspective to work with that deeper emotion.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. It's not about, yeah. Some people are like, their spiritual ego tries to do too much when you like, okay, these steps come first.
Yeah.
And, if somebody is like, no, I think I got it, but they go into the deep emotion, they go into deep shame or fear, and they're like, oh, I got overwhelmed, I got tumbled. It's like, all right, well, now like, okay, there's some other skills you need to develop. It's like, that's not failure. This is how you learn. Like, oh, I wasn't ready for that. Okay, well, let me go do the things to develop the skills and strengths so I can go do it. Yeah. It's like me going, after not working out for a while, going to the gym. It's like, oh yeah, I feel strong. I'm going to go do a workout. And just for 2-3 days, just being sore and going, okay, I wasn't ready for that. So my body's now, it's like, okay, let me go ease into that instead. then there's a long question. Okay, so there's some content, and I'm going to go to the second half, what you wrote here. I've discovered that listening to my body addresses both physical and emotional safety issues, feelings. So when you're ignoring, quote, ignoring the hunger, what is the purpose? It sounds like it is just to prove that it can be done. How do you know that what you feel is the body's actual need for energy and nutrition to keep from creating damage? Because I've tried doing the fasting, but I realized that doing so on work days when I used so much brain energy really affects my mood, and the effects last a while. I'm one of those people that get hangry. It's the hunger, the anger hunger. And it seems to be a hormone thing. Hunger triggers a lot of emotional safety issues with me, which I cannot trace to any childhood experiences because I've never been hungry in my life. A lot to unpack there, Janine, and I don't know where to I don't think any of this is to prove that it can be done. That's not what this is about. To me, and in the beginning of the cleanse, I talked about this is about freedom. And that we've been conditioned to live in a kind of a box or a lane that says, I need this, I have to have this, I can't do that, narratives. And that this, aside from being healthier for the body, we want to do things that are healthy for the body. And we're not asking you to not eat or go hungry. And the cleanse is principally about eat clean. Cut out processed foods, cut out the sugar, any added sugar, gluten, wheat, and, you know, then optional dairy and meat. Perhaps you cut that out as well and see how that feels. And use it as an opportunity for the freedom from what the mind says, I need, I have to have, fears of not, and explore freedom. And freedom may run up against the mind pushing back and saying, no, 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 we're afraid. Like my mind did. It was like, oh, afraid I'll pass out if I just have water for a day. I'm afraid I'll get hangry and I'll do something stupid at work. I'll overreact and I won't be able to control my temper with my hunger. Did that really happen? No. But until I did the new thing, I stretched the boundaries by this new, I didn't even know what the boundary was, and I didn't see how much fear was bounding me into, I have to, I need to, I can't change my diet. I can't change my eating schedule. There was to freedom on the other side of that, and then I had to go through those fears and those narrative stories. And that's what changing habits is about. And in this case, we're changing food habits. We're not just eating cleaner for our body and get our body cleaner, but it's the discovery of these narrative stories often that have fear, perhaps shame and fear of anger. They're like, do I need to live within that box? And challenging that.